interesting that we are discussing about sadhana bhakti and sadhya bhakti. And in English grammar, we have something called preposition, isn't it? There is something like for, from, etc. That which supports the various vibhaktis in Sanskritam. So if you want to understand the difference between effortful sadhana bhakti and the sadhya bhakti, it is in a very simple preposition difference. And the difference is moving for, to, from. You see, that's the whole thing. Okay. So, for example, if I'm doing japam for divine love, it is sadhana bhakti. When the same japa is done from divine love, it is called prema bhakti. When I listen to Bhagavatam for prema bhakti, divine love, it is sadhana. And when I am listening to Bhagavatam from divine love, it becomes sAdhya. Okay. And the intermediate step between sadhana and sAdhya is what is called bhava bhakti. So that's the starting, or that's the initial stages of bhakti. Our Guru Maharaj gave a wonderful example. We have an interesting ingredient in our cuisine called Asafoetida. In Hindi, it's called hing. And in Tamil, it's called perungayam. Okay. So that's a very strong smelling resin from the plant. And it's generally added to rasam and sambar. And sometimes when there is indigestion, they add it to even buttermilk. They give an example that when our grandmother or grandfather used to store these Asafoetida in a dabba, in a small little box, even after you finish off that block of this resin, which we use for cooking, that box retains its smell, fragrance for a very long time. Even when the box becomes empty, it retains its smell. So many times it so happens that before we come to satsang, we are like a box with Asafoetida. And after we come to satsang fully also, we are like the empty box of Asafoetida. Okay. So that smell persists, and that's what in Sanskritam is called vasana. Tamil being such a divine language, they use the same word for both. The physical smell is also called vasana, and the latent tendencies in the heart is also called vasana. You see, and so when you have this fragrance which is left in an empty box of this resin, that's when we struggle. If you had never been to satsang, you wouldn't have been bothered with all those wonderful fragrances inside of competition, greed, lust, anger, really natural. And for a person who is perfect in love, none of it exists. So both of these people are undisturbed in their life. When I say undisturbed, they're not disturbed about their state. That's what I'm saying. When they reflect, they are not disturbed about what they are. The two extremes. People who have no idea about spirituality, people who have no idea about what an ideal state of love and joy would be. All those people, they run their life, and for them, anger, the comparison, jealousy, all these things are part of their life. You see, and for a perfected person who has this tremendous love towards Bhagavan, a true Sadhya Bhakta, he has no traces of such, emotions or tendencies. So both of them are pretty much in a very peaceful state. But when you are in between, that's when we are like an empty box of Asafoetida. Now we don't do things which are like against dharma. We try not to do things. We practice positive things. But yet we have these tendencies called vasanas, like the fragrance of this hing in the dabba. What do we do now? So here there are two options. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa gives an option. You heat the box. If you heat this metallic box, when you say heat the box, I know the boxes used to be made of metals also, by the way, because we live in such a plastic world that I'm not sure if anybody have ever seen a metal box in America. I'm just pulling your legs. So imagine this Asafoetida box to be a metal box. So what you do when you heat the box, over time, the heat of the box vaporizes the latent residues of ink or Asafoetida in the box, and then it also becomes pure. That's the path of sadhana. That's the path of tapas. That's the path of penance. In fact, the word tapas itself means heat only. So here what happens is when you add heat to that box, it vaporizes all these remnants, residue. That's one way which is not suited for either you or me, given the lifestyle we lead. The second one our Guru Maharaj says is very beautiful, which is very practical. He said, in that empty box of Asafoetida, put green camphor. There is something called Pachakalpuram. In some of your places, if they do puja in your puja room, they generally add this green camphor. In water, they add it in at times even in payasam, etc. It gives a very strong positive flavor. In fact, one of our alvars, our Andal, Koda Nachiyar says that actually Bhagavan Sri Krishna's face, she's asking, does it smell of this green camphor? You please tell me, dear conch. Karpuram narumo, kamalappu narumo, Tirupavala Chavaidan Tittirukumo. She's asking, the conch is always being held by Bhagavan and he blows into the conch, isn't it? So she's asking the conch, tell me, you are the one who's closest to Bhagavan's face. How does his face smell? Does it smell of green camphor? Does it smell of freshly bloomed lotus? Can you please tell me? This is the language of divine intoxicated love, you see, which is impossible for normal people like us to experience. But it is very possible for all of us to relish, isn't it? You don't have to be a Mirabai to relish Mirabai's Kirtan. Mirabai can only be Mirabai. But we can all be normal devotees relishing such a great flights of love of such great saints like Mirabai, Andal, etc. So here, that green camphor, let me come back to the Asafoetida. So the dabba, even if it is empty, still retains the fragrance of hing or Asafoetida. And so there are two options available. One is tremendous penance of yoga, you see, suppressing the desires, suppressing all the sense organs, controlling the diet, controlling my posture, controlling my prana, controlling my mind. This is like heating the dabba. And if at all we have that strength and vitality left in us and we are ready to persist for maybe more than one human lifetime, at some point of time, I'm sure all the remnants by Krishna's grace would be vaporized and the box becomes pure and perfect. That's the path of sadhana in the sense of yoga sadhana, not bhakti sadhana. Bhakti sadhana is like adding green camphor into that perungai, hing, Asafoetida, dabba. This green camphor has a very strong odor in itself, you see. It has its own strong fragrance. And so how do you annul remnants of a strong fragrance is to substitute it with a stronger fragrance, which is more divine. And green camphor is a very divine fragrance, you see. And so when you start putting green camphor in the dabba, there'll be a time when it will smell both of Asafoetida and green camphor. That's the state we are all in, where we relish Bhagavatam also. And of course, there is a remnants of Asafoetida also in our little box called mind, which is natural. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to feel sorry about it. We should be happy that we have at least a small little whiff of green camphor's breeze blowing in our hearts. That itself is a great bhagyam. And so there will be an intermediate time when we will have both these vasanas inside, both these fragrances or smell or odor. And the vasana also means latent tendencies. Do you know what latent tendency is? For example, if two people are subject to the same experience, each of them have a very different reaction to that experience. How do you explain it? It is explained by psychology. They may call it as subconscious impressions or whatever. In our Vedanta, we say that we have accumulated this latent. Latent means hidden. You say na, in thermodynamics or in physics, latent heat is said. Na? Latent means hidden. Latent means under the surface. Okay. So we have this tendency. Tendency means if somebody comes and pats on our back, some people have the tendency to be angry. Some people have the tendency to be afraid. Some people have the tendency to be frozen, you see. And so these are all because we have accumulated those impressions. We have accumulated those ways of reactions or pathways of reactions in our past lives and also in the earlier days of our current life, and that's what we call as vasana. So we have these two vasanas mixed. One is the wonderful sweet-smelling vasana of green camphor, where we relish Bhagavatam, we relish Guruji's lectures, we relish wonderful Krishna Leelas on one hand. We also relish all these other stuff which are not anything to do with Bhagavan Sri Krishna on the other side. That's a normal life. That's what we are, and that's nothing wrong there. So that's the intermediate stage, and that's the start of Bhava Bhakti, where we see suddenly a window of the opens, and when a window open, breeze comes in, and this breeze carries this wonderful fragrance of green camphor, you see, and that's the start or inkling of things to come. That's the first sign of divine grace. That's the sign that we are opening our heart to something higher than their day-to-day stuff. That is a sign that we are opening our heart to something sweet, something divine, something spiritual. And starting of that phase is called bhava. You see, so for example, I'll give you an example. Suppose you all go to Namadwaar or our God Satsang daily, and you do bhajans. But one day that bhajan somehow touched your heart and you felt a little melted, you felt a little joyful when you hear that bhajan. It was not like that yesterday. It was not like that day for yesterday. It was only like that for not the whole duration of the bhajan. It was joyful. You feel moved for a few seconds, right? And that's what is actually called bhava, or the starting of bhava, you see. And when the bhava becomes complete, it's called sadhyam or it's called prema, you see. So remember the preposition. When we are doing for divine love, it is sadhana. When we are doing from divine love, whether it is japa or dhyana, not dhyana, smarana, or kirtana, or katha shravana, or even katha pravachana. Many times when we do pravachan, we just have to tell that subject and leave. But at times you feel very, spiritually charged. You feel the wonderful vibes in your heart. You feel that you are in the wonderful story yourself as a character. You can feel the emotions of the character. All that happens rarely. And that's the starting of bhava. Now you understand. And when it is complete, then it becomes prema, right? And that's what is called the final sadhya. Okay. And so this little box, let's come back to our kitchen. This little box of Asafoetida, we have tried to empty it. Now we are not doing consciously things which are going to be detrimental to our spiritual growth. But unfortunately, our mind carries the burden of the past impressions. And I hope you understand what impressions mean. Impressions mean, for example, when you have a small copper plate and people hit it, etc. Now nobody is hit it, but it carries the impressions of past hits. Most of your cars, our exteriors would be like that. If your mother or father is a very careful driver, or rather carefree driver, then what happens is it starts to get the impressions of all the scratches, dents. So it is carrying an impression of what happened 1 year back, or 1 week back, or 2 years back. Likewise, our mind also carries impressions. When somebody shouted at us 10 years back, it's over now. That person is not shouting at us. But this impression of that shouting is, as a hurt, is carefully nurtured in our heart. To this day, we remember. To this day, when we see that person, we remember 10 years back, you shouted at me. Where are we carrying this emotion? As impressions. And that's what I said, latent impressions or vasanas. It's latent because it's not available in the surface. Only when I have a trigger of seeing that person or hearing that abuse again from somebody else, it comes to the surface, like a bubble, which is hidden deep inside, suddenly comes to a surface. And so like that, the impression comes to the surface when the right circumstances strikes us. That's why I'm telling you, you yourself don't know what all impressions you carry. All of us are a bundle of mixed impressions. That's the reason why when we come to a satsang, all our spiritual impressions of the past is activated. In fact, it is no accident that all of us have come to the satsang because our past impressions has led us here. And since we don't know what led us here, And anything which we don't know, since we are all believers in divine grace, we call it grace. Grace means that which I can't explain. Okay. So that's what led us all to this satsang. So impressions. And that's the impression I'm talking about. And it is called vasana in Sanskritam. In Tamil, it has two meanings. It also means impressions. It also means odor or fragrance or, this smell. So the example given by our Guru Maharaj is a dabba with the resin called Perungayam or hing or Asafoetida is like a normal Laukika person, normal day-to-day living person. When I say normal day-to-day living person, that person goes to temple, he knows there is Krishna, he knows there is Rama, but he has no idea that he or she has no idea that the purpose of life is to develop that joy and love in the heart, which is our entitlement. It is our spiritual entitlement. We are all entitled. It's not a bad word in spirituality. Entitlement actually means it is available to me. I am a fool if I don't cash in on that. It's like a check ready to be cashed, encashed. And it's an endless supply of joy. That's the check we are carrying all the time, not even knowing we carry it. So that is the reason the normal person is like a dabba with the complete resin in it. And that person does not even know that he or she is entitled to tremendous joy, tremendous love in the heart. That's what we are capable of. That's your potential. And then this dabba with the perungayam goes over time, loses all the physical resin. This little thick block called perungayam, hing, Asafoetida is gone. And now that person goes into the satsang. You all listen to Krishna Katha. You all have seen Guruji. You all understand what is this wonderful potential of love and joy which is available in the spiritual arena. And yet there are these repeated, pulling back of these old vasanas, the old impressions. And that's the state we are in. And now, since we know that, look here, there is something called prema, there is something called anandam, there is something called bhajananandam. So I need to do something about it. So the purpose is clear that I want divine love. Why? Because I am capable of divine love. And since I have a guru, which is almost impossible to find, and also I have realized the guru is for divine love and the joy in my life more than, all these small other things. You see, of course, guru is like a mother, father, etc. But he's also a guru, na? Guru is like an inner guide and an external guide to take us to that state which otherwise we can never reach. Other problems can be dealt with. But this problem of realizing my potential, we need a guide. We need a master. So now is the state of sadhana bhakti. So now I am chanting. Now I am spending 1 hour. I know it's not a joke for your high schoolers to sit down for 1 hour. Some of you are college, some of you are working. So time is premium. Yet we choose to sit down and dwell on these things which are way beyond day-to-day mundane things for a reason that I realize that I am capable of this divine love. I am capable of this tremendous joy. And so I decide to invest my time in reading Bhagavatam daily, in chanting Mahamantra, in indulging in satsang, etc., to going to Namadwaar, etc. So I am doing all this for divine love. So that's what is called sadhana bhakti. Now we are guided by Mahatmas like Sri Sri Anna, our own beloved Guru Maharaj, Maharanyam, Sri Muralidhara Swamiji, etc. So they are doing every iota of work, every breath they take, every word they utter is from divine love. You see, so we understand that's the standard. You see, and I am here, so I need to walk somewhere and let the grace take care of the rest. And so that intermediate thing which we all can taste, certainly we can taste Bhava Bhakti. Can we taste Sadhya Bhakti? I don't know. It's not cut out for everybody. But we all need to aspire for it. But Bhava Bhakti itself is enough for us. Ramakrishna Paramsa gives a lovely example. An ant goes in search of something sweet, and suddenly it encounters an entire hill of sugar cubes, you see, these small little sugar crystals, as you call it. Huh? No, the ant would want to eat the whole sugar mountain, but for the ant, one small sugar particle is enough. And it takes an elephant to eat a sugar hill. And like that, Mahatmas who have descended to guide us are like that elephants. They can gobble up mountains of sweetness. For us, one little particle of this sugar is enough for us. And that's what is called Bhava Bhakti. And for that, we are all aspire. Even that small little joy is so much, is so beautiful, isn't it? That's why you are coming back every week. Because Guruji has blessed us with this little window where he's showing us, look at this, see how beautiful it is, how joyous it is. And that's what is called Bhava Bhakti. That transient joy we experience, the transient melting of the heart, the transient love we experience, maybe for a few seconds, doesn't matter, it's worth it now. That's what is called Bhava Bhakti, an intermediate stage. And the state in which our Guru Maharaj is, all these Mahatma, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, etc., they are all in the state of prema. You see? So those are the three levels. So we are doing things for the divine love. And by Guru's grace, we are tasting divine love every now and then. That itself is so joyful. Mahatmas do everything from divine love, you see. And we can certainly grow in this intermediate. That bhava can be increased. Instead of a few seconds once in a month, we may have few seconds almost daily. And maybe few seconds many times in a day. And that itself is great. And then we know to relish and to appreciate divine love, etc. That's beautiful, isn't it? How many people in this world can understand and relish these things? Even the most brilliant minds in physics, brilliant minds in engineering, brilliant minds in medicine. Why? Brilliant minds in research. They are not able to grasp this divine love. And that's the reason why this divine love is very difficult for people to understand. Even people who speak Upanishads, Shastras, they won't actually appreciate divine love as much as you people are doing. That's what is called grace. You yourself don't know your greatness. The greatness not because of you as individuals. It's because of we as a collective entity, guided and blessed by a Mahatma, is something very rare. And that too, a Mahatma from a Bhakti Sampradaya is rarer. You see, our Kabir Das, he says, Bala Pura Sabka Sun Liche. People will tell you all the positives, negatives, pros, cons, etc. Just listen and keep going. A Bhakta is never interested in arguments. That's why Bhaktas and Bhagavatas don't debate when it comes to spirituality. They would say it is what Krishna has showed as his light in you. So you follow your path and Godspeed to you. But for me, Nama is enough, Bhagavatam is enough, my Guru's instruction is enough. And Krishna Prema is more than enough for me. You see? And that is how beautiful, rare, precious either Nama chanting is, or Bhagavata Katha is, or Prema Rasa is. It is the highest Rasa. And as humans, we are here as humans only to relish the Rasa and feel the joy which comes from Rasa. You see? And thankfully, because of either our fortune or the causeless grace of our beloved Guru, we all have somehow landed in the right place, gravitated towards is the right term. And either because of our parents or independently or both, we are all here to experience and to actually be enlightened in something which we can't imagine, maybe even in future lives, if we have more lives to come. We have not had this opportunity in so many thousands of past lives. You know, it sounds a little intimidating, but it's the truth I have to tell you. And that's the wonderful, rare opportunity to be open to a Guru's grace so that you can see realms, you see dimensions, see vistas which are impossible for a normal person to even imagine to see, you see. And that's the beauty we are all being given.